Mark Rogers TV, always talking college football, getting you set for the 2017 season. And we're running down the top 10 games in the SEC this season out of conference. So, the SEC dominant in college football for just about a decade, but there is concern about the ACC and possibly the Big Ten taking over as the top conference in college football. Right now, it's a great debate. The SEC is not dominant, but it's not necessarily dropped from the number one spot. It's a great debate. The ACC played the best in the postseason last year. They won 10 of 14 against the SEC. Not all of those were fair fights in regards to seeding. The Big Ten may have had the best regular season. So does the SEC reclaim the top spot in college football in 2017? This is what we consider to be the top 10 games of the SEC against the other Power 5. Let's start at number 10 with a date that Vanderbilt plays against Kansas State at home. This is an interesting matchup because, think about it, Vandy, not much expected from the Commodores coming off a bowl season in which they went 6-7 after getting obliterated by NC State in postseason play. But if Vandy can knock off what is considered to be one of the best teams in the Big 12, probably the fourth or fifth best team in that conference, and Vandy nowhere near the top of the SEC, this could be a big game in proving that the SEC is once again the best in college football. If one of the lesser teams in the SEC can knock out a potential conference contender in the Big 12, then that is a good statement for the SEC. It's an interesting battle between Derek Mason's club and Bill Snyder, the Wildcats and the Commodores. That's game number 10. All right, number 9, we've got Tennessee taking on Georgia Tech. That one played at the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. The Volunteers and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets on the opening Labor Day night, September 4th. So, Tennessee had a date against Virginia Tech last year. The Hokies eventually getting to the ACC championship game, and the Vols completely outclassed the ACC at that point. It was one of the few wins, count them, for the SEC against the ACC last year. This time it's Tennessee, Georgia Tech, neutral site in Atlanta. Opening weekend on Labor Day should wrap up a fantastic weekend of college football. And right now, the ESPN Power Index gives the Vols a 68% chance of winning over Georgia Tech. I think that's a bit high. All right, at number 8, an interesting regional matchup with South Carolina taking on NC State. All right, these are two programs trying to find their way in their respective conferences, trying to gain some respect, and trying to rebuild and prove that they can play with the upper echelon teams. Both borderline bowl teams last year. NC State with the aforementioned win over Vandy, and South Florida got the best of South Carolina in the Birmingham Bowl. The Gamecocks going to show us some offense this year with Jake Bentley at quarterback and a number of weapons on the outside, including Brian Edwards and Deebo Samuel. We've provided you with a lot of recent South Carolina analysis with Will Gunter. All right, NC State, Ryan Finley back at quarterback, looks to improve upon his junior season with NC State. South Carolina, NC State, that's our game number 8 for the SEC out of conference. Number 7, Texas A&M going to the Rose Bowl to take on UCLA. It was a really good game at Kyle Field in 2016 with the Aggies holding on in overtime. But this time, they go cross-country to go to the Rose Bowl to take on UCLA. This is going to severely test Kevin Sumlin's recent track record of starting each season at 5-0. There is concern about how the Aggies will finish again this season, but they may have a difficult time just getting to that point with a difficult non-conference game against a UCLA team that, despite 2-7 in the Pac-12 last year, despite only winning 4 games, it's a much more talented unit than that. Josh Rosen back at quarterback after only playing 5 games last year. UCLA, pretty talented roster against Texas A&M. That's a Sunday night affair on September 3rd, opening weekend. All right, number 6, we've got Georgia Tech. It's one of the traditional ACC versus SEC games. We've got Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Kentucky, as well on that final weekend, November 25th. This could prove crucial. So if Georgia exceeds expectations, and right now they are many people's pick to win the East, but if they win a game that we're going to talk about in just a second out of conference, they could be playing for big marbles when they take on the Yellow Jackets, and that is never an easy game, or I'll say rarely an easy game for the Bulldogs. They dropped it against Georgia Tech as the Yellow Jackets finished at 9-4 and won 3 games against the SEC East last year. So it's Georgia Tech in Atlanta on November 25th, that final weekend of the season. Meanwhile, in Gainesville, we've got the Gators possibly trying to finish off a special season if they can beat Michigan and, more importantly, win the key games as they have in Jim McElwain's first 2 years with Florida in defeating the big boys in the SEC Eastern Division, winning those key games and squeaking out the division title. They want to get the monkey off their back, though, late in the season. Beat Florida State, win an SEC championship game. Yeah, they did win a bowl game this past year, but they got slaughtered by Michigan the year before. They want to finish strong. Florida hosting Florida State November 25th. That's our game number 5. All right, top 4 games in the SEC out of conference this season. This is an intriguing one as soon as it was announced. Georgia going to South Bend to take on the Fighting Irish. Notre Dame with a long, illustrious history of playing SEC teams in postseason play. But this is one of the rare times that Notre Dame will play an SEC team during the regular season. We remember playing the Notre Dame-Tennessee games back in the 90s. This, again, one of the rare ones. Notre Dame-Texas A&M when the Aggies played in the Big 12, another example of that. But now we got Georgia, early season test, week 2 at Notre Dame. Yes, the Irish went 4-8 last year, but Notre Dame should be much improved this season under Coach Brian Kelly. So September 9th, Georgia at Notre Dame. Really look forward to this one. We'll see if Kirby Smart's team can travel and win a big game on the road. All right, final 3. These are heavyweight matchups. Number 3 in Arlington, opening weekend, Florida, Michigan. The 2 teams played 2 seasons ago in the Capital One Bowl or the Citrus Bowl. Michigan stomped Florida, I believe, 41-7 in that game. Michigan losing 16 starters from last year's team. Wilton Speight back at quarterback. Florida, we know what this quarterback situation is between Franks and Zaire. McElwain will have to decide who his Game 1 starter will be against a stout Michigan defense, although they lost most of their big-time players from their front 7, including in the back 7, Jabril Peppers, natural safety, who played a lot of linebacker for Michigan last year. Of course, he's moved on to the NFL. Florida, Michigan, this is what we love to see on that first weekend. Big Ten, SEC, bragging rights here in Arlington at Jerry's World on September 2nd. All right, game number 2, we've got maybe the most important of the games because the final game we're going to talk about includes 2 teams who may make the college football playoff even if they lose this first game. For this one, especially concerning the Auburn Tigers and the stumbles that they've had out of the gate in recent seasons since the big 2013 run under Gus Malzahn. Since then, it's been disappointment after disappointment, and a team that was extremely strong through 10 games last year at 8-2, stumbled down the stretch, lost to Alabama, got embarrassed in the Sugar Bowl against Oklahoma, coming back with quarterback Jarrett Stidham, the number 1 Heisman candidate in the SEC, going on the road against Clemson. Auburn showed us what they could do against a Clemson offense at home last year, but they've lost a lot of those playmakers up front out of that defensive line group. Of course, Clemson has quarterback concerns to worry about and get sorted out during August camp. Should be a great game and would be a big win for the SEC if they could get this one. Auburn on the road at Clemson, very difficult place to play on opening weekend. And finally, this may be a game between the 2 best teams in college football. Arguably, Bama, Florida State in Atlanta at the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Jalen Hurts against that tremendous Florida State defense, which may prove to be the best in college football. I know that claim usually goes to Alabama, but we're going to see Ohio State's defense turn out to be one of the very best in college football as well. Clemson keeps churning out great defenses, but this Florida State unit, probably the most talented. Derwin James coming back after being lost early in his freshman campaign, or early in his sophomore campaign, after the sterling freshman campaign he turned in. Josh Sweat, Travaris McFadden, tons of playmakers on that Florida State defense. DeAndre Francois showed us that he could play in the clutch and he could face adversity, and he's back for a big second season as the starter in Tallahassee. In Atlanta, opening night of college football, September 2nd, opening Saturday night, Alabama, Florida State. That's our number one SEC non-conference game for 2017. As always, we invite you into the conversation right here on Mark Rogers TV.